Assalamu alaikum. Today in this video, we are going to learn about the structure and function of mitochondria, which is an important organelle of the cell. So let's start. So first of all, let's discuss the discovery of mitochondria. First of all, mitochondria was studied by Albert von Kolliker in 1857. First of all, it was first studied by the Albert von Kolliker while he was studying the muscle cells of human, or you can say the human muscles. And then after a while, another scientist came on the scene, Richard Altman, in 1886. He coined the term bioblast. So at that time, during the 1886 era, mitochondria was commonly called as the bioblast. Later on, another scientist came named Carl Banda. Carl Banda in 1898 coined the latest terminology nowadays we called it mitochondria. So it's the very brief review about the discovery of mitochondria. First of all, it was studied by the Albert von Kolliker in the muscles tissues of human being in 1857. Later on, another scientist came, Richard Altman, proposed the term bioblast, and then the Carl Bender came on during 1898 era. He coined the term mitochondria. The size of the mitochondria is 2 to 8 micrometer, and in most of the cell, mitochondria occupies 20% of the cell volume. Actually, it depends upon the cell's activity. As much as cells consume energy, so the number of mitochondria will become increased in that particular cell, which is using more and more energy. For example, in our muscle cell, there are lots of mitochondria in the muscle cell, as compared to some other cells of the body which are, you can say, passive in energy mode. They can't consume energy much more, they can't produce. So the number of mitochondria will be less in that cell, as compared to those cells which are active in energy production. So more mitochondria, or you can say more number of mitochondria will be in that particular cell. So let's discuss the structure of the mitochondria. So first of all, let's draw the diagram of the mitochondria. For example, in most of the cell, mitochondria is rod-like structure, or in some cells it is oval in structure. The mitochondria is a double membranous structure, as we know, the outer membrane and the inner membrane. The outer membrane is smooth, as it is depicting in this diagram. This is the outer membrane. Okay, outer membrane is smooth as compared to the inner membrane. Inner membrane has finger-like projections. These finger-like projections are called as the cristae. These are called as the cristae. Okay, these finger-like projection are called as the cristae. Singular is the crista, while plural form is the cristae. And the between this space which I am filling with the red color, this space is the intermembranous space between two membranes. Okay, intermembranous space between the outer membrane and the inner membrane. And inside the mitochondria, there is a watery or jelly-like material is present. This material is called as the matrix. The matrix contain all the enzymes, okay, as well as its own DNA, as well as its own ribosome. We know that mitochondria have its own DNA as well as the ribosome. So here we are going to discuss the inner membrane in detail. First of all, let's the diagram. Let we draw the diagram. This is the simple schematic diagram of the mitochondria. Okay. This is the outer membrane. Okay. First of all, we are going to discuss the outer membrane in detail. Okay. So it's the freely permeable to so many molecules like nutrient food molecules, like the pyruvic acid, which is formed at the end of the glycolysis, we know. So this pyruvic acid or other food molecules pass this outer membrane to enter into the mitochondria. So this membrane is freely permeable and it is simple phospholipid membrane. It's simple phospholipid membrane as the plasma membrane of the cell. Its structure is simple. It has cholesterol, it has all the integral and peripheral proteins, simple phospholipid membrane. Okay, so multiple types of ions, nutrients, and ATP molecules can pass through this membrane. Okay, so that's why we called it the freely permeable. We are talking about the outer membrane. So now we are going to talk about the inner membrane. Now the inner membrane. Inner membrane, we know it's not smooth. It has folds. These folds are the finger-like folds, inward projection. These folds are called as the cristae. Okay. So actually, it increases the surface area of the mitochondria. It increases the internal surface area because cristae, so many folds like its structures. Okay. On these cristae, for example, this is cristae. Okay. It's an actually individual crista. This crista has some proteins, some special proteins, which are called as the ETC complex, electron transport chain complex. These are the integral protein of this membrane, inner membrane. Okay, it passes the electron. So these complexes pass the electron. So it is called as the electron transport chain protein. So many protein. We will discuss this electron transport chain whenever we are going to start the chapter bioenergetics. So electron transport chain protein complexes are found on the inner membrane, on the cristae, as well as some other important proteins are present. These proteins are called as the ATP synthase. Okay, so it helps in the generation, the creation of ATP. So students you should remember that ATP synthase proteins are present on the inner membrane of the mitochondria. It provides us with the ATP, with the energy currency. So that's why mitochondria is often called as the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, so remember the term powerhouse of the cell. Powerhouse of the cell. Why do we call mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell? Because ATP synthase proteins are present on the inner surface, which helps in the synthesis of the ATP. Whenever the food is going to catabolize, electron transport chain will be run. With the help of this electron transport chain, ATP will also synthesis. ATP synthesis machinery is located on the inner membrane, that's why mitochondria is often called as the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, as well as it also contains some other proteins which helps in the catabolism of the food. Now we are going to discuss the matrix. Now the matrix. So the matrix is the watery substance or jelly-like material which is present, which fills the inner compartment of the mitochondria. Okay, so it's the jelly or watery medium present in the mitochondria. Okay, so what does it contain? It contains mitochondrial DNA, which is also called as the mito-DNA, as well as mitochondrial ribosomes, okay, for the protein synthesis, as well as it has some enzymes which helps in the enzyme system help to run the citric acid cycle, citric acid or TCA cycle. TCA cycle, we know TCA cycle runs after the glycolysis. Glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm, After that, the pyruvic acid is formed. Pyruvic acid goes towards the mitochondria, pass the outer membrane, then enter into the matrix, okay, where the citric acid cycle is going to be occur. After the citric acid cycle run, the certain substances, certain chemicals are formed, which are called as the NADH, like FAD. These substances will pass through the electron transport chain, and when these substances are passed through the electron transport chain machinery are present on the crystal membrane, okay, cristae. So after that, energy generation is going to be occurred. That's why mitochondria is often called as the powerhouse of the cell. So matrix has enzyme for the citric acid cycle. Matrix has oxygen. Matrix has water content, carbon dioxide content, as well as it also contains mitochondrial DNA, as well as mitochondrial ribosomes. Mitochondria is also called as the semi-autonomous organelle. Why do we call mitochondria as semi-autonomous organelle? Because it has its own DNA and ribosomes. Okay, so with because due to the presence of DNA, it can run its own replication whenever the cell consumes more energy, whenever the amount of the energy consumed by the cell is increased. So the mitochondria will produce its own copy with the help of the binary fission. It's a method of reproduction. So it has its own DNA. It doesn't depend upon the nuclear DNA as other organelles do, as well as it has its own ribosome. With the help of DNA, it will produce its transfer RNA as well as messenger RNA. These messenger RNA, transfer RNA will go to the ribosome in order to create the protein. So mitochondria produces its own protein. That's why we called it the semi-autonomous organelle. I hope you have understood today's video. Inshallah, in the next video, we'll be learn about some other cellular organelle. Thank you so much.